Welcome, dear students. The focus of the current session is writing system of Old English. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would have an idea of what was the writing system of Old English and how did it emerge. Well, my dear students, if we think of Christianity and writing, we know actually very little about the Anglo-Saxons until after their conversion to Christianity, which introduced them to the use of Roman alphabet for writing extensive texts. As elsewhere in medieval Europe, writing was in the hands of clerics, that is the religious figures. Now being religious figures, of course, they had their certain priorities. And what was their priority? To spread Christian spiritual teachings. So, we learn little about the ways of the heathen English from their writings. Some evidence of pre-Christian traditions has, however, remained fossilized in language. We still find some remains of that. So, for instance, the heathen gods, Tivu, Woden, or Thunor, that is thunder corresponding to Scandinavian Thor, and Frigg have given their names to, today's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. However, these names are translations of the Latin Martis dies, that is days of Mars, Mercury dies, that is day of Mercury, Iovis dies, that is day of Jove, and Veneris dies, that is day of Venus. So, what conclusion we draw from this? The conclusion is we cannot be clear about these translations, whether they were the works of pagans or of Christians. More remarkably, the goddess Asthore has probably given her name to the Christian festival Easter, that even, in Pakistan we know about that, apparently because the pre-Christian English had a month named after her, which usually fell around the time of year when the Christian festival of Easter would take place. So, this is how the names were taken. They were derived from the names of gods and goddesses. The pagan deities named in the days of the week are also commemorated in place names such as Tuesley, Wednesbury, and Thunderfield. I hope you are able to identify the names of, days of the week in the names of these places. The pagan cult sites are attested by place names like Harrow, that is from Old English, Her, which means temple, and Y, that is from, in Kent, that is from Old English, Wig, means idol or shrine. Well, the conversion of the English to Christianity began somewhere around year 600, and it took almost a century for the process to be completed. It was not carried out in one direction, it was carried out in two different directions from two different angles, the Celtic church penetrating from the northwest and the Roman church from the southeast. With Christianity, with this conversion to Christianity, came the Latin model of writing. The English already had one form of writing, runes. But these were used only for short inscriptions, not for texts of any lengths. In fact, these runes were used, to kind of to write on buildings, on walls, etc. These were more, like those ways of, carving that were used. So because these were carvings, by the way, so they would be in straighter lines, there would be less curves in all of them, because naturally it is easy to carve when you are carving on a wall or on a cave. It's easier to carve it in lines. My dear students, the word book, from Old English book, if you look at the screen, you would find here how it was written, originally meant beach, while it is clear that the Old English verb writan could mean both to write and to scratch, because again linking it to the runes where, it would be, the alphabets would be more like in lines to carve, I think the meaning of the word makes some sense. The word rune, as it was written in Old English, also meant mystery or secret, and some inscriptions were perhaps thought to have some magical power. However, it is unclear how and where the runic alphabet originated, but it has clear similarities with Greek and Italic alphabets, among which the Roman alphabet is the best known and the one we use even today. Because of their use in inscriptions, rune had acquired a kind of angular form, as I have already said, and they had straight lines and they were easy to scratch. The best known inscriptions are those that are the Scandinavian ones. And the earliest English inscriptions use forms of the runic alphabets that closely resemble the ones that you would find elsewhere in Germanic-speaking areas of the world. However, the English developed in the 7th century a distinctive form of runic alphabet, which from its first 6 letters is known as Fthok. This is how it was written in Old English. When the clerics introduced writing to England, they used a version of Latin alphabet in order to write all those religious scripts or religious or spiritual texts. So, for example, using these Fthok symbols, the 6 symbols that I talked about, for example, they used this symbol that is called Win. This was used to represent the Old English wo sound. In modern editions of old texts, it is customary to give the Latin letters their modern form, to use this particular sign instead of that Win sign that I have just shown you. The purpose is to make it easy for the modern reader to read it. But originally, this Win sign was used. It is also common in the modern editions to mark the long vowels with, a macaron. A macaron is a horizontal, this kind of, as for example on this I put this line. This particular line. So this is called a macaron. So a macaron would be used to mark, if, for example, a vowel is to be pronounced, as a longer vowel. Whereas if we go back to the Old English, in writing there was no distinction between the long and the short vowels.